something others might want to hear. Hi, Audrey. Good to see you.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Just in from our maple sugar shack. We were making bottling up
Ooh,
maple syrup.
all right. I can't wait. I can't
Yeah,
wait.
you'll get some.
Oh, that reminds me, I have a homemade oat waffle in the fridge, and it's gonna have to get Whole Foods maple syrup for the next 3 months. Well, whenever that runs out, then I'll buy more. Yeah, we used to get real maple syrup in when my family traveled to New Hampshire.
hmm
Yeah, we would bring back, the real McCoy. So
Linda, hi. Linda, did you get my email?
Hello.
Did you get my email I sent you a couple of days ago?
No, I didn't. I'll check my spam. Some of my
Okay.
stuff has been going to spam.
It was just from me, and maybe we can talk at the end. And maybe I had an old email address. Who knows? I just used what popped up. Oh, good. It looks like Tim is here.
so we're assuming that parents will be here too, and students.
We hope so. I think we'll give it another minute before we really get started. Another 3. We are recording this. Tim gave us permission.
Okay. Oh, it says 10 participants. I don't know
hmm
what am I
Yeah,
doing
there are more
wrong?
people here, not on screen.
Oh, okay.
There's Tim.
Oh, there we go. I had to click that I acknowledge that it's being recorded, and then my camera would work.
Right. Okay.
Ah,
Yeah.
never done that before. Hi, Tim.
Hey,
Good to see you. Hopefully we have a few more join us.
Yeah, I think we'll wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. And so Tim Enger, you'll be introducing Tim Lytle, right?
Right, yep.
Okay. I think I'm going to get my video off.
this could get confusing.
Right. Tim, here's Tim. Okay. Well, I'll still be
Janelle.
here, but I'm going to get my video off.
Okay.
And you already gave access to Tim. It looks like he has screen sharing. So.
Well, he was on when I got on and he was sharing.
Okay, good.
That worked.
So while we're waiting, Tim, I'll tell you that one of my homeschool evaluation students did a term paper, and he had me kind of help him evaluate it, and that's not really my forte. I'm more a math science guy. So I thought, I'm going to use ChatGPT. So I, uploaded his paper, and I did it in our rich text format, RTF format, and then uploaded the rubric that I use here with our school students, for grading it, and then asked it to evaluate it and give me a report. And it did. Didn't take it very long, and did a good job. It was interesting, but I gave him a 42% on his paper. Well, I mean, writing is not his strength. So I reevaluated it, and he got a 75. But
Didn't quite factor in feelings.
It has no feelings. It's just I'm looking at the criteria, and you got a 42, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah, the only thing you could do to help that would actually be to give it samples of work that you felt was at the same level.
Okay. Nah, I don't want to go.
No, but like if you were going to actually automate grading a bunch of papers,
Yeah.
give it, find what you would say this is this level, this is a good, whatever you call it, and give it things to benchmark at, because it should be pretty good at comparison.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I do like how you can, in experimenting I've done, once you get something, you can ask more questions to say, well, I like this, but I want to change that, or give me more info on this. Yeah, it's like you're having a conversation. But anyways, I don't want to steal your thunder.
No, that's the value. It never gets tired of being asked questions.
Yeah. That's what you should do with your toddler, right? Put your toddlers in front of ChatGPT and just let them talk and talk and talk.
Why?
I can't read the answer.
Well, we could talk about why asking why is actually a very good thing to do.
Mm.
The 5 whys and all that, but that's a different topic. So.
Okay. Well, how many total do we have on board here so far, Susan?
We've got 14. So I think we could probably get started. We'll probably have a few more people coming on. And we are
Okay.
recording this tonight.
Okay.
So should we have everyone who's not presenting turn off their video now and maybe turn it on at the end when there's question time?
Okay.
I mean, Zoom's pretty good about blocking those out. I don't mind seeing people's reactions. That helps me understand whether it's connecting with people.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, then we can stay on.
All right. Well, let's get started. Of course, I just mentioned I'm a high school teacher, and I've been a homeschool evaluator for 35 years or more. And in fact, I think, Tim, you were one of my students many years ago, back in the 1900s, probably.
Yep.
And now you've gone on to do things with software development. And from talking to you, I know you use AI quite a bit. And you and I had a conversation a while back, because I just was a little bit uncertain about it. Like I wondered, is this the mark of the beast? Is this, are we giving too much power? And is this going to take away jobs? And is this going to be, a cheating tool for students? And, just how should we view this? And I appreciated that after our conversation, I came away feeling like, okay, it's kind of like back in the olden days when calculators came out. And we thought, oh no, calculators, that's cheating. But it's a tool, and computers have become a tool that we can use. And actually, Microsoft Word and Grammarly suggest ways to improve our spelling and we don't today view that so much as cheating. It's a tool that we take advantage of. And so you kind of helped me be a little more positive about it and experiment with it and not feel like I was poking the Antichrist or the beast or something. So why don't you kind of take it from there and just kind of give your perspective on what is AI and what are pros and cons, and define terms a little bit.
For sure. All right. So this will be interesting. I've got some different content here, but since it's well, let's just do this. Let's just start off with it. All right, we're going to come down here. This is ChatGPT. If you've never seen ChatGPT, it is a chat interface to AI. And I'm going to use the words AI and LLM, or a large language model, interchangeably, because in today's world, they pretty much are, at least when people are talking about artificial intelligence. What they really mean is a large language model. We'll get to what that means in a second. But I'm just going to ask a large language model, what's the advantage of a live presentation, which is what we're doing tonight, over just watching a YouTube video? Because the reality is you could watch a video on all the things I'm going to talk about tonight. I could make a video on all the things that I'm talking about tonight, but you're here live watching it. So I'm going to encourage you to ask me questions. Feel free to interrupt me, put them in the chat, and Tim will interrupt me. So because the point of doing this live is so you can get the content that is tailored to you and not expect just something that was general content, that maybe from that you can try to apply it to whatever your context is. You're here talking to somebody. You can be a part of this. This is the point of doing a live presentation like this. So I will encourage you to ask questions and interact. Feel free to interrupt me this evening. The things I'm going to try to address are questions like these right here. We got some practical questions. How do I use artificial intelligence? There's different ones out there. Which one should I use? How and what should I use it for? What's it going to do for me? So those are the practical questions. But as Tim alluded to, there's also some philosophical questions, right? Like, is AI going to take over everything? For let's say the older audience tonight, like the old movies War Games, right? Where AI started or almost started a world war, right? Or HAL in Space Odyssey, or for the perhaps younger generation, like Avengers, Age of Ultron. Is AI going to start doing its own thing and taking over? So we'll talk about that a little bit. Is it safe? Some people may say, well, didn't AI say that Trump was the worst and Biden was the best? Or say that Biden was the worst and Trump was the best? Or AI is made by progressives, so it has an agenda. Or AI is made and funded by capitalists, so it has an agenda. And we can come to it and say, well, it's dangerous, right? Because isn't it biased? We'll talk about that a little bit too. And then the best question, right, that everybody thinks about, at least you see news media coverage, like, is it going to take my job? Is it going to replace me? We'll talk about that too. And we could, I mean, honestly, we could go back down. We could ask AI all these questions, but I mean, I don't know that we should trust the response, because it'd give us the questions, the answers that it wants, wouldn't it? I think one of the ways to answer both of these sets of questions is to make the topic less magical. Like most things, understanding how it works helps us understand how to use it. And I don't know if you've seen the quote before, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So we're going to try to make AI feel a little less magical. So bear with me as I show you some examples and talk a little bit from a technical perspective of what artificial intelligence, specifically large language models, which is when you hear ChatGPT or Grok, or you may have heard of Claude, those are different models, what it really is and how it really works. I won't get too deep, because the reality is I don't even understand how it works. But actually, the reality is the people that are building it don't actually understand how it works. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. So we'll try to answer some of these questions by talking about how it really works. And I think we'll reveal the answers to some of those questions. How many of you on your phone, and you can show by like a wave or a thumbs up or some type of indicator, does your phone suggest the next word or phrase when you're typing something, right? Is it generally pretty good, or is it terrible? Probably pretty good, right? Okay, maybe a little, all right, different responses. Has it gotten better than maybe it was 3, 4, 5 years ago? So let's have AI do the same thing, just to kind of show. We come down here and I'll just start a new chat. So if I just started typing in the beginning, it'll think, oh, and it'll complete it, right? Because the reality is what your phone is doing here is very similar to what AI does, what large language models do. So I want to kind of answer some of the questions as we go through this technical discovery, so it's a little less dry. So if you're asking, how can I use, what can I do with AI? Have you ever had a thought that you couldn't quite finish? AI is pretty good at finishing it. It's really good at predicting the next thing. Do you have a list that has like 3 items on it, and you know there's like 10? Like, these are the things I should teach, and I can think of this one and this one and this one. But I know there's more than that. You can ask AI to complete the list. You can use it to bounce ideas off. And let's take a look at one example down here. Come back here, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. I was going to change my model, but I don't think I am. Yeah, let's just do this one. We'll use the same model. We were teaching history. We still are teaching history because that's kind of what you do, right? We were teaching history, and we taught about revolutions: French Revolution, Chinese Revolution, Russian Revolution, American Revolution. Then we taught about World War I and II. And then we talk about ancient civilizations. And we do it in a one-room schoolhouse because if you don't know who I am, we have 9 kids. My wife teaches them all. So for history, we tend to do it with all the kids, and we just read books and dig into these different topics. So as we think of kind of like a 4-year pattern, what else should we fill in? We created, like, this is what we have taught. Now, what should we teach? What have we missed? And AI is really good at predicting what those things might be. See, it's here, it's thinking for a little bit. We'll talk about the memory updated. I don't know if we'll get to that, but you can say, oh, maybe we should teach about the Middle Ages. Maybe we should teach about the age of exploration and colonization, which honestly is what we did. Maybe we should teach about the Enlightenment, the Industrial Revolution. That's what we're doing this year. So it's really good at filling in the blanks. If I give it some information, it can kind of fill in the gaps very similarly to how your phone does the same thing. You say, hey, I'm running late, and it auto completes for us. So how does this work? Worth mentioning, I think Tim mentioned, I'm a software developer. I'm a computer programmer. I'm also a Pennsylvania Homeschool Association graduate back in the class of '00. I don't know, is that what we say? Is that what it was? So 25 years ago. So I guess PHAA has been around for a while, hasn't it?
Yep.
But I'm a developer. So if I was trying to tackle this problem of predicting the next thing you were going to write on your cell phone from a traditional programming perspective, that's where we say we have input. Hey, it's what you just typed. And then we have a program that says, well, I'm going to look at what you typed, and maybe I'm going to compare it to everything I see you've typed in the past. And I see that after you say, hey, sometimes you say a developer because it's me. Sometimes you say Tim Lytle because it's me. Sometimes you say it's not interested because you want to buy my house for some reason and you're texting me. Sometimes I say almost done because I'm telling somebody an update. But I can't just find the most frequent one and put it on there because that might not actually match the context of everything around. So then I go, oh no, I have to also know who I'm texting with. I have to know what I've said before. Oh, there's so much context. And when you think about the complexity of trying to understand based off of all that context, predict what I'll say next, we realize that traditional computer programming, where we say you've got inputs and you have code that does things, and I instruct a computer how to process it, is not going to solve this well. So instead of using the traditional concept, there's something called machine learning. And machine learning is where I say, I'm going to flip the equation a little bit. I'm going to give both the input and the output. I'm going to say, look at my past conversations and all the context, then look at the next word that happened. So you have both the input and you have the output from the past. And this is the same way that we do things like predict weather. This is the same way we predict what our revenue is going to be in complex business models. We say, I have all these inputs and here's the outputs in the past. Now figure out what caused that. That's called machine learning. And tell me what I'm going to say next based on what you've learned. Now, which sounds kind of interesting. How do machines learn? So we'll talk about that briefly. It's called neural networks. Learning has a few interesting steps. First, we have to convert everything into numbers. And numbers that the value, the number value, has meaning in relation to other similar things. So if we're working numbers, we understand that 2 is bigger than 1, it's less than 3, right? So words, we're going to have to give number values to, and a value that communicates a lot about it. I'm not going to talk about how that works because that's really complex, but just know that we convert them into values, numbers, but they're numbers that have a lot of rich meaning. And then we say, do math stuff with it. And you can say, Tim, what math stuff? I don't know. No one actually knows. We know what they are, but we don't know how it's going to change. We don't know what is going to be applied. That's actually the learning part of it. And then we say, give me the output, which is another number that I will then convert back into well, whatever the thing is that I'm trying to understand. So if I went from words into numbers, I'm going to go from numbers probably back into words. If I went from an image into numbers, numbers back into image. Maybe I say I want an answer. Maybe I want to say, does this image contain a duck? So we go from image to numbers to a number that gives me a yes or no, or a likelihood, a probability that it contains a duck. I don't know. That's how machine learning works. Let's just to answer the question of what you can do and how you can use AI, keep in mind that it's the same concept. And though a lot of things that people talk about are words, because like Tim was saying, are people going to use this to cheat? Are my students going to write entire essays with AI and I'm not going to know that it's the AI that's writing it? So we think a lot about words when it comes to AI, but it's the same concept for whatever it is we're converting. So give me a moment and let's see if we can do something interesting here. I don't know if this is going to work, mostly because ChatGPT learns from what I do with it. So it knows I've already done this once. So it may have a better answer than it did before, but we'll see. I can come down here because, again, the AI model, it's not just about words. It's also about images. It's also about whatever we can push into this machine learning concept. And I can give it that information right there. And I can say, hey, why don't you just explain that slide? And that's what it's doing. Maybe it will tell me, maybe you do a better job of explaining that slide than I did. Maybe you could look at that and say, well, Tim, you made some good points, but the AI did a much better job of explaining the slide that you created than you did. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? So we see the phrase convert to numbers suggests that raw input must be first translated into numerical representations. Yep, true. Do fun math highlights the fact that neural networks perform complex mathematical operations on those numbers to recognize patterns. That's exactly true. The wavy arrow and the 2 plus 2 are playful way of illustrating that mathematical computations occur inside the network. No, that's actually wrong. It missed that, but we'll see if with more context it understands it better. The phrase convert back to numbers means that after processing, they're translated back into human understandable format. Yeah, that's what we said, wasn't it? The sequence of numbers could represent a sequence of processed data values that change as they move through layers. Not really, but we'll see. Overall, this slide provides a high-level overview of how a neural network input data, process it mathematically, and output meaningful results. So it's not just words that you can feed AI. Think about what your students might be able to do if they captured the slides of presentations and fed it to AI and said, hey, could you give me more information about this? And we'll talk about how powerful that could be in a second. So that's how neural networks work. Convert something to numbers, do stuff with it, get output. How do we learn, though? Well, we train them. So if I give it all of my text, instead of doing that, let's go to these numbers. This is a really bad example because AI, honestly, is terrible at math. And we'll understand why in a second. But let's drop out the conversion side and just look at the math side. So if I said, I want to teach a neural network how to do math, again, a terrible idea. I could say my inputs, I want to teach it how to add. So my inputs are 2, the symbol plus, and 2. Look at that. They're already numbers. We'll have to fudge the plus so that make that a number, but they're pretty much numbers that we can understand. And we tell the neural network, add these. And it goes, I'll give it a shot. I'll do something and I'll give you a result. The result's 20. We're like, no, the result's not 20. I know the result's not 20 because 2 plus 2 is 4. So I tell it, no, you're wrong. Try again. And when it tries again, it changes some of the things that it's multiplying, some of the filters, because that neural network has a bunch of math operations it does. It multiplies, it has biases, it has filters that say, hey, if we reach this threshold, then pass this on to the next node in the neural network. So it'll just start adjusting the dials randomly, pretty much. And it'll give me another one. It'll say, I did it. Now I'm going to give you the answer. The answer is 25. And you can see we're going to say, no, that's worse. You did worse. So whatever you did, do the other thing. So it then readjusts in a different way and says, okay, the answer is 19. You're like, oh boy, you're getting better. You're warmer. And then we keep saying, give me another one, but you were better, but not quite as good as you need to be. In fact, your change was very slight. It's okay. We'll turn those dials in the same direction, but further. Now we got 15. We're like, that's great. Keep going. You're not there yet. Turn the dials even Even further in the same record, 7. That's great, but you're getting close. You might want to calm that one down a little bit. All right, we'll just turn the dials a little bit. Oh, now we get 6. Turn them a little bit more. We get 5. Turn them a little bit more. Oh, we get 4. You've learned how to add. And when I say turn the dials, I'm not turning the dials. The developer's not turning the dials. The neural network is turning the dials. It's making changes based on how far it sees its output from what the intended output is, until it comes to the point where there's a bunch of weird math things that are happening that say, if you give me 2 numbers and an operation of plus, I'll add them, but I won't really add them because we know how adding works and computers can add it. What it's really doing, it is approximating the operation of adding. It is predicting what adding might look like, which is why AI is terrible at math, because it's just approximating, predicting what math is. And math is something that you don't have to predict. You can just do it. But hopefully this explains a little bit about how learning works. We just keep giving it input and we tell it how far away it is from our intended output until it gets close enough and we're like, yeah, you now know how to predict the output for a given input. So go back to the questions that we asked in the beginning. Is AI going to escape from the lab and take over the world like we see in a movie? No, it's not, because it's not even thinking. It's approximating thinking. It is predicting thinking. It has done a bunch of math that when it does it consistently, generally gives us a good result that looks like it's thinking. But it's just predictive text. It's just what your cell phone has been doing for years, just much, much better and in a context that can be much, much more useful. And the other answer, what should I use this for? I already touched on it a little bit. Not for math. Don't ask AI to do your math homework. So, Tim, your job's safe. The English teachers, they should be concerned. But the math teachers, you got it. Except you don't, because it could be really good at explaining math. It's just going to be really terrible or not that great at doing math. It could set up equations just fine because equations are language, but executing the operations not so good because the operations are not pattern matching, they're actual functions. And what machine learning is good at is pattern matching. But believe it or not, isn't pattern matching very close to what communication is? It's me identifying patterns and then understanding how I should respond. So it's really good at approximating, predicting those types of responses. Right, context. I forgot about that. We gave it the first slide, which didn't have this section, this training section off to the side, right? Let's grab the second slide now and see if it does any better. So if I give it that extra dish and I say, what about now? Because it had no idea what the 20, 25, 19, it said, I don't know, maybe that's how numbers are passed through the neural network, which wasn't what that slide was trying to illustrate. So keep changing explains how a neural network improve over time. It refers to adjusting parameters like weights in a neural network to reduce errors and improve accuracy. That's exactly what we're talking about. Learning from existing data, the handwritten note, my existing conversation suggests that the network is learning from past interactions. This relates to machine learning models being trained on historical data to make better predictions. Exactly what happens. The sequence of numbers might represent how values are modified during training or indicate how confidence in a prediction is refined through layers. Yep. And it even caught that we have chain of thought in the back, which is not what we want to get to yet. All right. So we talked about a little bit like this is how we can predict what the next message on my phone is, right? But what if we applied it to more than just my text messages? And that's where we're going, right? And we kind of already know that. This is one of the technological advances. We now have the computing power to analyze much larger sets of information. Takes a ton of power, though, which is a legitimate concern that some people raise. The amount of energy that is being consumed just to run the AI models that people are then using is significant. For example, OpenAI, for one of their levels, charges $200 a month to the subscribers. And the usage, they are still probably losing money right now in terms of how much it costs to run those models, just the raw computing power and then the energy, the electricity that is consumed for it. So what if we, instead of my text messages, what if we did this with all written knowledge? What if we fed not just my text messages, but pretty much the entire internet, and then everything that we've written and been able to digitize into a predictive model to teach it what things are, how grammar works, all that kind of fun stuff. Then we could do things like this, and we could ask it information, and it would know because, well, it's read about it, and it knows what follows. And it can say, well, I would predict that the response to this is to tell you all this stuff that I know. And it's not really no. It's just I have the understanding that this is a reasonable response to give based off of everything that I've read, kind of. People that really know how neural networks and LLMs work are saying that's not quite true, Tim, and it's not. It's an approximation. So what if we did it with all written knowledge? So we go through and we take all these words and we either take the individual words or, like you see here, parts of words like no, and we say, well, that's going to represent a numeric value. It's going to be a token. You'll hear things like tokens and the token limits in the context of AI. Tokens are how many fragments or pieces, or even sometimes individual words, sometimes it's characters, can a model handle at one time? How much can it kind of keep in its head when you're asking it a question? So it's the tokens, which, like this for no would be a token to have a number value, and then an embedded vector, which is all the context, all the words or the tokens that are related to this tokens, the grammar, the meaning, where it's found in the sentence. So it knows in this particular token, no is related to ledge and written, and it's in the context of a question, and that helps it understand the relationship of words. So by doing this, we can train it how to predictably or reliably predict the next word off of existing known text. And humans don't even have to interact with that. We can just feed it existing text and like take away part of the word and see, oh, look at that. It knows what it can guess what that word should be. So now we have a machine that has learned how to write sentences, and it can and not just sentences, but sentences that make sense by just guessing or predicting, approximating what would come back. So the answer to what should I do with this? Here's another thing that you can do. It's read a lot. It's read a lot. It's read more than you and me. You should use this for editing and for getting feedback on writing. Hands down. Your students should too, because there's no reason to keep them from a tool that everybody else is using. It's just that simple. So here's an example. And you should not, let me just grab this here. You should not just obviously let it rewrite your work and copy paste, because that's just like copy pasting something from the internet, right? People can already do it. It's nothing new. Like if your student wanted to just find an existing report and copy paste it, they can. So here's the original description of this presentation that Tim sent me. And I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I want to move this to Canvas, which is an interesting tool for ChatGPT. It lets me kind of collaboratively edit on a document, much like it was another person collaborating with me. And I can say, hey, can you provide some feedback on this description? The audience is homeschool parents. I'm not really a fan of IT, like the phrase. So I would change that myself, but I'm not sure what else fits. So here it's giving me some feedback on that writing, just like you might ask a teacher, a friend, a mentor. So if you're like, hey, I'm a student or I'm a parent of a teacher of a student, and I'm not really a fan of writing myself, I don't feel like I have that strength. You have a tool now that does have that strength and can give you lots of feedback. And you can ask it to explain why you might want to change things. I can also just make this more of a collaborative document, come in here and say, hey, ask GPT, can you this to not use the word IT? And it'll do some editing. And if you want to see the editing, you can just come back and show the changes, and you can say, oh, that's what changed to that. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I guess I can go with that, or I can undo it. So just like you might have someone go into a Google Doc or some other collaborative editing software and do some edits for you, you can use AI to do a very similar thing.
Yeah, I got a quick question I want to insert, Tim.
Yes.
Without distracting you or putting you on a rabbit trail too long.
Yeah.
you mentioned that, like ChatGPT has access to everything that's been written, and like Google has taken a lot of books and turned them into, digital format. And of course, every blog post that people have written, every website people have put up, and I guess they call that scraping the internet. So all that's available to ChatGPT. Is that also behind Grok, and is that also behind, all these other models that use AI? Are they all accessing one big database, or have they all had to do the same thing in the background to create their own database of knowledge?
That's a great question. It's the latter. It's that they've all had to scrape it in their own way. There are existing archives of large amounts of data that I'm sure they can use and share. In fact, there's open source models. So some of the ones that were mentioned, like Grok's not open source. ChatGPT or the GPT model is not open source. But things like DeepSeek is open source. Llama, yeah, I think it's Llama. That's from Meta, which is Facebook, is open source. So there's things people can learn there. But the fact is, that's a huge amount of knowledge. So when you think about it, just training it on all that, the output takes forever. So you're going to train your model your way, and someone else is going to train their model their way. And even if they train it on the same data set, you're going to have nuanced differences. And we'll talk about why in a second. Because at this point, in what I've technically explained, we have something that can create reasonable and coherent sentences because it understands both topics, content, related ideas, sentence structure. But it's not necessarily what we see in the whole, like the big thing now for the past 2 years is this idea of I interact and I chat with AI. It's like it's a person. It feels very, very much like a conversation. So we haven't quite got there and how that works yet. And this is what we do. So once we have a model that knows how to make sentences and has a whole lot of information and knows how words relate to each other, all of which, again, can be done in what is known as self-supervised learning. In other words, I just take existing text, remove a few words, say predict what it is, and tell you how close you got to the words I removed. When I say I removed, it's a program doing that. It's not a person. So you can just let this thing churn and take forever to process and build a model that knows how to speak, kind of knows how to create sentences and create information and content. After that, now we get where humans come into play. Now I can start prompting it with questions and asking it questions. And in its response, I can tell it, I like the responses that are answers. And I like the answers that are relevant. And I like the answers that are relevant and that make sense. And here's that question started with, is AI biased? Of course it is. It's biased by what it's self-trained on, right? Whatever content has been fed it to do the learning, it thinks is probably true. So when you think of it, if you pick and choose what historical narratives you give it, you'll have a model that has different perspectives about history. If you give it a wide range of historical content, you'll have a model that tends to view history the way most of us do, which, by the way, is a bias. And then as we come into this fine-tuning where humans actually interact with it, well, as humans mark the response as I like this response or I dislike that response, we are putting biases into it. So it is, of course, biased. Each model was going to be biased by whatever humans trained it and whatever content it learned on. It comes with biases. So if you're concerned about the biases, which is a legitimate thing to do, use different models and see how their biases fit with you. Or the other thing you can do is you can just tell it what your biases are. So here's an example. If I say, I'm going to grab this and just let's get rid of that. So you don't see that yet. Kind of gave away that secret. If I say I want you to outline a 5-day hands-on science course for younger children about the world around them, well, I'm going to get whatever biases probably the model has. And it may be incompatible with what I want to teach my children. But if I say, you know what? I want this to be from a young earth creation perspective. I want to utilize the first 2 chapters of Genesis. And I want to use the King James Version whenever scripture is referenced. Now I've just given it my biases. And when I hit go, it'll start using those. So it's not so much about being worried that, is it going to tell my kids something I don't want it to tell? You're pretty much in control. Plus, hopefully you are monitoring what it's saying and having those types of conversations, because that's far more important than just not using things. But we can see here, day one, light and darkness. All right, Genesis 1 through 5. Hands-on activities. Turn off all the light. Oh, that's great. Color spectrum. Sure. Day and night. Fill a jar with black and white marbles. All right. It's interesting, right? Might not be what I would do, but I can ask it for more ideas. Discussion questions. What would it be like if God had never created light? That's an interesting discussion question. So it's an interesting place to start. And it's not telling me millions and millions of years, which would be incompatible with my biases, because I gave it those constraints. So of course, AI is biased. It's biased by everything it's been trained on. It's biased by the people that have been training it. There's incentive for things not to be too biased, because you want a large amount of people to be using your software. And then you can offset those by just biasing it yourself with the information you want. So now we're at a thing that we would call a model. This is a machine learning system that we can ask questions and get answers, which is pretty much the models that we're in today. Oh, and if we're talking about models, if I come back here, you can see that if I could select a bunch of different models. This is all just ChatGPT, but ChatGPT has models that have advanced reasoning. We'll talk about that in a second. We have GPT-4o Mini. This is an older, or the 4 is an older model. That's why it says legacy. 4o is a faster model. So it doesn't have nearly the context, but it'll work a lot faster. Whereas if I do O1 advanced reasoning, it could take it minutes for it to give me an answer as it tries to figure things out. And when I say figure things out, that's a weird thing for me to say, because I said they don't really think. So how does it figure things out? And we'll talk about that right now. So once we have the model, and by the way, the models keep getting better, because if you've ever used ChatGPT or other models, sometimes it'll give you two answers and it'll say, which one do you like better? Well, you are training it through that. You're telling it which one you prefer better. So you're telling it what is the best answer to give to a person like you. And you are help informing it as to what answers it likes. And you are using real-time reinforcement feedback to help improve that model. But what if we want to approximate reasoning? Not just question and answers, but actual reasoning. So we could ask the model to split up a problem into steps. We could say, I'm going to give you a complex thing. I don't just want an answer. I want you to come up with what I'd have to do to get the answer. And instead of showing a real example of this, because it would take a couple minutes, I'm going to show this example. So a homeschool family has 3 children with different learning styles. One is highly visual, one learns through hands-on, one prefers listening, right? How can the parents design a lesson plan that accommodates all 3 children? And you can see it took it 1 minute and 2 seconds to come up with an answer. Why? Because it started talking to itself. So it said, I'm going to come up with a plan on how to do this, and then I'm going to feed that back in and ask myself those questions, essentially. So it's not really breaking down a problem, because it doesn't necessarily know how to break down a problem. It is predicting the steps that would be needed to break down this problem. And then on each step, it is asking the model to do that very thing. And that takes some time as it goes back and forth and feeds things back into itself. But in the end, it comes up with some answers. I think probably Tim would be the best judge as to whether or not this is a good way to do that, as I know he has taught on how to teach to different styles. But it comes up with an example on how to teach one lesson to each different style and then combine those. And here's some practical tips for multi-style teaching at the end. But that's our current state of the art at trying to approximate reasoning, is to break things into steps and then have the model handle each step. Is there another question? No, I heard a noise and I thought we should interrupt this. The last thing that's the current state of the art is what's called retrieval augmented responses. So this is where we say, hey, you're asking a question, and then I have all, and this is why, if anyone has been using ChatGPT since, oh, let's say early 2022, something like that, 2023, those times, you would find that its answers were out of date. And it would even tell you, it'd be like, I only know things up to October something, or I forget what the date was, 2021, because that was the last time it had ingested information. That was the last time we had given it, OpenAI had given it a bunch of information and built that model. So it was stuck there. So when you'd ask it a question of like, what day is it today? It wouldn't know because it has no context of those things. But now we've said, well, wait a second. I know how to give you the day. So if someone asks me, what day is it today? I can totally have the model spit out instructions to a computer because it knows. Here's the thing. If I ask the model as a computer programmer, how do you by code determine today's day? It's like, I know that. I read it. It's right here. This is the fragment of code that tells you what day it is. So the model can just say, cool, run that fragment of code. I'll get the output. Now I know what day it is. That's really interesting. So now instead of just feeding in my prompt, I can also feed in information related to my prompt. And I'll do one example or show one example because I feel like that's probably more useful. I don't know if anybody's played Settlers of Catan. So that's a board game. And here's the PDF of the rules. It's not that complex of a board game, but it's also, it's not Chinese checkers either, right? It's a little bit more complex than some games. So I gave it the rules and I said, can you help me set up this game? So this is an example of saying, I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to prompt it. I want to know how to set up Settlers of Catan, but I'm also going to give you the information you would need. And you'd be like, Tim, couldn't you have read that? Of course I could read that, but that's like pages long. I don't want to read pages of information when a computer can distill down exactly what I need to know and extract from what might be a larger document the thing that is impactful for me in the moment right now. Why would I have to research all of that just to come up with the answer that I need in my immediate context when I can have it do that? So this is me manually doing retrieval augmented responses where I'm saying I'm giving you both the prompt and I'm giving you the information. But advanced models now, and here's an example because spoiler alert, I may have used AI to build a lot of this content, not a lot, but to validate a lot of this content. And I said, I'm doing a presentation on AI in the context of homeschooling. You knew that. You're here. Had a bunch of things about my understanding of AI because I wanted to validate that I wasn't telling you things that weren't right. Can you fact check all those things? And then I admitted I'm also lacking understanding what vectorization is and some of the other low-level concepts because I had a decent understanding of how neural networks work, but not too in depth. So it starts, ask me some questions. So right here, this is important. This is a new thing that we have in reasoning LLMs. They're saying, let's ask the user to give us a little bit more context about things that we think might be helpful in this. And when I say think, again, I'm saying the word think, but it's just guessing. It's just predicting these would be things. If somebody asked this, this would be something that an expert would ask for clarification on. Great. I give them the clarification, and it took 7 minutes.
Wow.
So you think about that too for a second. We know how fast computers work. It took 7 minutes. And that's what I mean when I talk about the raw computational power and the energy that is currently being consumed by large language models and AI. It took 7 minutes. And here's it explaining what it's doing. Because it starts to say, well, if I was going to do this, what would I have to do? Well, I think an expert would work through each section. If I'm pretending to be an expert, explaining what I do, I work through each section, I'd analyze it, I gather information from this site. Okay, so then it goes to that site. And as you scroll down here, you see all of the different things it read. Could I have read those? Of course I could. Did I want to? No. This would have taken me hours. It took them 7 minutes. So they pulled all this data together to take a look at what I had said and tell me where I was wrong, where I was right and give me a deeper understanding on the pre-training, which is the self-supervised learning, on the fine-tuning, on reinforcement learning through human feedback. We saw that on the slide, tokenization and vectorization of text, and in the context of what I wanted, because I told it I didn't want a deep dive. I don't want to build one of these things, but I'm a software developer, so I should probably be able to understand most concepts pretty closely, but just summarize it for me so I can quickly get up to speed on how it works underneath the hood, because I want to make sure that I am presenting this in a reasonable way. And that's what it did.
Wow.
And then once I put the presentation together, as you can see, and you can see I'm having conversations here, and I said, hey, you know what? I'm not strong in the higher math concepts of how neural networks work. Give me a little bit of that. It did. So it's like, oh, now I understand more of what's going on when we're training neural networks. Come down here at some point. As you can see, I have different conversations because as I had different questions and different things that I needed to be solidified in my understanding, and I give an example. I'm saying, hey, this is what I understand. I think that this is how an LLM works. When I say quote a verse, it doesn't know the verse. It just knows, based on the references, the words that were around it, and based on language constructs that it has been trained in, it knows how to reassemble those, but it's not pulling it from memory. It's not like, oh, I know exactly that verse. It's just constructing it. It's like, yep, you're pretty much right, but let me tell you where you're wrong and explain exactly what's going on behind the scenes. That's great. Down here someplace we'll see, I fed it, if I can scroll far enough. There's the presentation, and ask it for any feedback. It goes through and tells, and in fact, it's really, I was impressed with what it did there, because the logical flow of information, because it understands we went from neural network to training to fine tuning to retrieval augmented generation, because it actually understood the arrows. So let me go back to the presentation. That's the current state of the art. Not only is it able to approximate a response based on all of the content that it's absorbed, it's able to approximate reasoning by creating the steps that it needs, identifying the steps needed to solve, then also saying, well, if some of those steps are go out and find information today, it's able to go find information today and pull it in and analyze it. Because in fact, if I could show it, I could ask, like, does PHAA have a webinar today? It would say, yes, it does. Because it would go out to the PHAA site, it would pull that out, and it'd see that, yes, there's a webinar tonight. So back to the answer. Is this going to replace us? Is this going to take our jobs? Maybe, if what you're doing can be easily replaced by this type of approximation. But it's probably better not to think of it as replacing it, but thinking of it as freeing you up to do things that humans are really good at. Because once this can be automated, well, you just saw, instead of me having to spend hours researching a topic, I could give it my basic understanding and say, you research it and give me the executive summary of where I'm wrong, and one that is geared towards me and my context and my existing knowledge. Think of what that means for your students who might be trying to understand a concept. They can say, I already understand this and this and this, but I'm really struggling to put this together. And instead of them having to go out there and find the site that actually explains that concept right, you have a large language model is able to absorb a ton of information and then give them what is a guess as to the right response for their question. They don't have to go find it someplace. It can approximate that response from a large body of information that would take them a significant amount of time to consume. So, will it replace us? No. Think of what you could do if this could assist you in your everyday work. And then as to the what can we do with AI question that we started with?
Okay, so I'm going to
Research.
interrupt you for just a second, Tim, so you can
Yeah.
catch your breath. And I'm going to just share 3 quick things that I used it for recently. I don't know if I even told you this,
Yeah.
but I teach our children, our elementary kids, on Wednesday nights. And back in May, there was a lesson I wanted to do about the crowns that Christians can earn. And I mean, I know it. I could look it up. I could do the research, but I just tried ChatGPT and I said, use the King James Version. This lesson's for elementary children. What are the crowns that a Christian can learn with an application for each one? And boom, it gave me a better outline than I probably would have, produced myself. but it was exactly what in my mind I knew I wanted to present that evening. And so it saved a lot of effort in pulling it together and looking up the verses in the concordance. But it was still what I intended to present. And then this year I'm teaching a photography class for the teenagers in the spring here. And so I basically just said, this is a class for teenagers. I want them to be able to use their own cell phones, not have to buy fancy phone cameras. And what are the topics that should be included, like lighting and composition and what else? Kind of like you had said earlier, give me a list. And then I said, take each of those and turn it into a lesson plan for about 30-minute lesson plan. And it was amazing. Here I had a lesson plan for each of these, and then I could save it to a PDF file or a Word document on my computer, and then I could go in and edit it. And then the last thing that I used it for was in physics for a lesson. I to create a lesson plan for this topic, and then even create a worksheet that the students could do to get extra practice solving problems with this formula, and then create an answer key for that worksheet. and it was really amazing what it could do, and a lot faster, and the formatting was nice. And I didn't end up using that in the class, but it was amazing to see how easy it was to do that, and how, and then, maybe you're going to go on and talk about some of the things you've done in your homeschooling with curriculum ideas and whatever. But I just thought I'd let you catch your breath and think there. You've been rolling right along. So, but good. I think I've learned a lot. I don't know if everybody else on it's followed it all, but it's been very interesting.
So yeah, the use case here with what we can do is like Tim was saying, that research. Pull this because we can say, oh, or we can feel like it's cheating because I'm having AI build this lesson plan. But what would you do? You'd go out and Google lesson plans and look at other people's work and be like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I should add that. You're just having that done for you, and then you can look at the result and change it however you want. That's the thing too. You should be editing what these large language models give you back. They're not the answer. They are a tool. So I have no idea. Here's what we're going to have to figure out, I think, in education. No idea how to cite ChatGPT or any other model, or Grok or Claude. But if you just want to learn, this is amazing for research. You can say, hey, I want to do this specific thing. I use this every day, this concept every day in my job. I want to do this specific thing that is specific to our context. And here's like exactly like what our users are like, what we're trying to accomplish. And I know I want to do it with this technology. So then ChatGPT or whatever model I'm using can go out and research the general idea, get a lot of stuff that I would have to read through, and then think about how do I take what they've said and apply it to my specific context. And it'll just tell me how to accomplish it in my specific context, because it will do that translation for me. So it is super useful at research. All right. So back to our questions. The how, the which, the what should I use it for? Here's the simple answer. Just use it. Just use it. Pretend that it's a friend who's read everything and you ask them questions all the time. Just use it. Whenever you're like, hey, I wonder, just ask that question to a large language model. See what the result is. You'll discover something that somebody else never thought of using it for. Now you may say, well, which one should I use? Whatever's easiest for you. This is like one of those things, like a chef saying, or not a chef, but a beginning cook saying, well, which knife should I use? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Just grab one and start cutting those tomatoes. It's not going to make a big difference whether you use ChatGPT, whether you use Claude, whether you use Grok. It doesn't really matter. I say those words and you're like, I don't know what. Maybe you use Gemini. If you have an Android phone, you have Gemini built in on your phone. If you're a Twitter user, you have Grok built in right there. If you don't, go to chat.openai.com. That's ChatGPT, and sign up for free. They have free accounts, and just start using it. If you're running on Windows, you might have Copilot right there. Start playing with that. If you use a lot of Office like Microsoft, you may find a Copilot for Office subscription useful. That could be actually very useful for you depending on your context. But don't worry about which one it is. Use whatever's easy for you first. Then you'll start to realize which one you like. But you're not going to pick the wrong one.
And then, are you saying you would use it very similar to a Google search? So instead of typing it into a Google search, go to ChatGPT and do the same kind of a search?
Yes. I'd ask it the questions because most of the time when we do a Google search, what we want to do is understand a thing. And then we think about like, well, how would I search to find an article that tells me how to do the thing? Well, forget that two-step process. Just do the first one. Ask it the question. Like the other day, we're saying our daughter, she should probably learn how to make sourdough bread. She likes baking. So I was like, hey, tell me everything I need to know about making sourdough bread. I know I could go find an article, but then I'd have to look at a bunch of different articles and be like, does this article actually tell me everything? Or does this just
Or does it
figure it
tell
out? And
too many personal stories before it
yeah,
gets to us?
give me tell and especially I could give the context too. I could say, yeah, this is for my daughter. This is so it's for a not quite teenager yet. And I want to understand how hard is it going to be for her to keep up with the starter. And I kind of know what starter is, but I don't know how you're supposed to start. I don't know what you have to do with it. There's this discard thing. Just explain it to me. And that's what you would normally say, like go into Google and type, how do I make sourdough starter? And you get tons of results. And you're like, I think I'm going to pick one of the first three because that's probably the best. Then you have to read through that article and then see how it applies to me. But I could give it all the context that is personal to me and say, I bet you probably have that information. So predict what the response is. So essentially, I mean, what we're basically doing is we're telling a large language model, pretend I was writing a blog post to tell a homeschool dad who wants his daughter to make sourdough bread all about how it would work. What would that blog post look like? It's like, oh, it would look like something like this. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted. And what should you do with it? Everything, everything. Like I have ChatGPT on my phone. Like I said, if you have a Twitter account, you have Twitter on your phone, you have Grok on your phone. Next time you're wondering about something, just ask a large language model. See what happens.
Hmm.
So my final slide, and Tim alluded to this a little bit, is who I am. Yeah. So if you have questions, you can email me, tim@timlytle.net. Pretty easy to find. Wouldn't mind feedback on this, whether you thought this was useful, whether you thought it helped you understand things, whether or not you felt it encouraged you to use AI for more things. I use it every day. I'm going to use a fancy startup-y word. I use it to ideate. So if you're struggling to try to wrap your head around an idea, like I need some other thoughts, I need whether we call it brainstorming, whatever we want to call it, just throw some things at us. Give me some ideas. I'll give you ideas. They may not be great, but then they'll spawn other ideas, right? I use it for every day for writing code. And that's not like a chat GPT thing. That's a thing that is built into the tools that I use to write code. And because code is language, it's really good at guessing as to what I mean to write next once it sees what I'm writing. It's really good at that. It's also good at introducing bugs. So you need to know what you're doing. I use it to review and revise content. If I'm writing something, it's going into there to ChatGPT or Grok or Anthropic is another company that has a model called Claude. Claude tends to be like a little bit more educated in its responses. So if that's your flavor, maybe try Claude. And Claude has a chat interface just like ChatGPT. As I mentioned, I use it to build courses and curriculum. So for history, we will ask, I could show you this huge chat. It's like we are doing the Industrial Revolution. Tell me what books my kids should be reading. Tell me what videos, like what movies, what films will tie into that so we can have this cohesive organization. I use it to do research. I use it to automate work. That's a little weird. It's still not there yet. Having automated tasks, they kind of work. They don't really work. It's iffy. But I use it pretty much for everything.
Okay, Tim, here's a down to basics question. Do
Yeah.
you have to pay to use any of these, or do you have to set up a membership?
Yeah.
And does it kind of track you particularly
Yes.
and your answers and hold on to them?
Yep. Great questions. Some of them you can use for free. Some of them do not require a sign in. Most do. Most have a free tier that you can use. And then, yes, once you sign in, most track you intentionally, right? So if I look at my settings, if I can find memory, personalization, manage memories. So here's everything it's remembered about me. You say, oh, that's super creepy, Tim. Yeah, kind of. But also, now it knows all the things I've told it about my life. So when I ask it questions, it gives things that are relevant to me, which is probably why when I started in the beginning, it didn't end with anything but a Bible verse. because it knows about me. It has had conversations with me in the past. I actually use it to build out a weekly Bible study for our Sunday school. I'll say, hey, here's the reading from this week. Bunch of different chapters. Give me 10 verse sections that could be used each day. Just find interesting topics. I'll curate them. I'll figure out what I actually want to use, but just from those chapters, extract the things that I might be interested in teaching on. So I didn't know if there were any questions.
I didn't see any come through. Just saw somebody said they had to go to another meeting, so they said they enjoyed it, but they had to leave.
So like
Yeah,
I said,
I've enjoyed experimenting with it. And I know one question I had, Tim. Do you think how is it similar to or different from like Alexa that you just talk to and then it gives you an answer? Is that also
so
using a large language model in the background?
I wouldn't be surprised if both Alexa and your like Google Homes are using a little bit of a large language model now. Before I think they're a lot more programmatic, where it's just like I'll throw the question to the search engine and just give you back kind of the response. For what it's worth, there's a voice interface for ChatGPT if you run it on your phone and some of the other large language models. In fact, there's one which I cannot remember it, but if you search for it, I'm sure you'll find it. It's an AI assistant that runs on your phone. You basically just turn it on and it listens to the conversations around you. So it would be perfect if you're having an in-person meeting, just put on the desk. And then as it listens to the sound, you pull up an interface on your computer and you can ask it questions. You can say, hey, can you research that thing we just talked about? And it'll go off and try to do that. So it's like a personal assistant that's sitting there. Or if you're just like, hey, I want to sound smart. What would I say now that was really smart? It can do that too.
We're going to be experimenting soon with some software, Tim, that's I think AI based in our church services where the preaching can be in English.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody can, excuse me, with an app be listening and it'll translate it in real time to several different languages, depending on how much you want to pay to have available. But I think the basic model is like 2 or 3 other languages that listeners can listen in on.
Yeah, real-time translation like that is a great example of machine learning. So, and that's where the lines get blurry. Like we didn't used to call machine learning AI. So when it's a large language model and you're chatting with it, people are like, oh, that feels like artificial intelligence. Yeah. I mean, but does the model your weatherman uses to predict the weather, do we call that AI? By the same fashion, it kind of is. So.
Hmm. Good. Susan, do you have anything else that comes to your mind that you think would be good to ask?
Well, this has been really enlightening. I really appreciate the time that you put into developing this presentation. I think you realized who your audience was really well and really tailored it to all of us. And I really appreciate this. And since we are recording this, we will be putting this up on the PHAA website so other people can gain from what you've shared here too. And I think that'll be really valuable for people. And I just really appreciate all the effort and time, and you certainly helped me gain some insight and to view it a little bit better than just this is a tool to help students cheat. Which I think most students, that's the way they view it. But I think you're showing us some good things, and I liked very much, Tim, how you helped us realize like all the things that we are using it for, like the prompting, what's the next word on the phone chat, that's really, it's very similar. And that's helpful. Or just the idea of what Tim mentioned, the other Tim mentioned earlier about, how we used to freak out about calculator use and then realized, I mean, I remember years and years ago hearing someone from the PA Department of Ed saying, well, if after 12 years of schooling, all our kids can do is something that a calculator can do in half a second, we probably haven't taught them very much. And, I think that's an important way to think about it too.
Especially now since we basically walk around
Yeah.
with large language models, or at least access to them on our phones. At any
Right.
moment, you can say like, "Hey, research this for me."
Mhm.
And if we can get our students to see the value of that, and
Mhm.
not, oh, it can write a paper for me.
Yeah.
You can get a paper online. You can pay someone to write a paper. Like, you can already do that.
Mhm.
It can help you understand the thing that you don't understand. And
Mhm.
it can do it in a way that is meaningful to you because you can give it your context. So
Mhm.
it can be like that tutor
Tutor.
that is understands you, because that can be hard to find too, is the student is a tutor that can communicate with you. Once you understand how to give it your context, it can explain those things to you in a way that's meaningful and relevant to you.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's very
Audrey,
patient.
Yeah, that's true. Yes. It never, yeah, it is very patient because it's not a
Audrey,
person.
Audrey sent a question, Tim, she
Mhm.
said, is AI on the computer the same as Chat GPT?
I'm not sure I follow that exactly. Um, but I
So when
maybe.
I when I open my computer or my phone, let's just use my phone,
Mhm.
and I type in Joe Bloggs, blah blah blah.
Right.
First thing that comes up, it'll say
Mhm.
AI said, and then underneath it'll have that, the 20 things you mentioned. So is that AI the same as we're done homeschooling my children? I'm an evaluator, so I'm past the daily use of it. But I did teach when I was out school, so there are ways that I could use it. So I'm trying to make sure I understand it. So when I use my phone or the computer and I type in a subject, it'll bring up AI,
Right.
and under that, it'll have all these links. So what are you telling us to do?
So the results that you see there are Google's, which, just to give a little context there, is terrifying to a lot of people, not for the reasons you think, because usually it'd be, if I was in the top three results, man, I'm going to get a lot of traffic to my website. So for people that build things online, I want to be in those top three results. Now it's changed because now I want to be something that is cited in those top three results, or not
Okay.
cited, it's cited in that AI block. I want to be a
Okay.
reference material for the AI. So to explain the difference, so ChatGPT, let me just go down here and we can see. So we have, yeah, this is actually at ChatGPT dot, or what is it? Is it chatgpt.com now? It used to be chat.openai.com, but OpenAI. OpenAI is the company behind ChatGPT. If you just
Okay.
go to google.com
Hmm.
and type in Pennsylvania Homeschool Association. Out, they don't give it to me up here. I guess it didn't have enough.
Okay.
How to grow potatoes.
Or if you ask a question, yeah.
How to grow potatoes. So this right here, this is what you're talking about. This
Right.
is this is an AI summary. This is going to be
Right.
powered by Gemini. Gemini
Okay.
is Google's AI, which you could
Okay.
also get on your phone. If you have an Android device, you could get it on your phone. You could actually go to Gemini's website and you could ask it questions just
Okay.
like I asked ChatGPT.
Okay.
But the distinction there is, this is Google just adding this A, and we're going to find this more and more, that applications give us summaries, give us ways to interact with a very similar type of thing. And when we
Hmm.
talk about models, there are so many models. OpenAI has a ton of them. Google has multiple of them. There's open source ones, and different companies will leverage those to do different useful things. Like, I would not be surprised if things like, say, Khan Academy or sites that we might use for educational resources
Hmm.
come up with like a summarize with AI button,
Okay.
or chat with this lesson, right? They're going there, and what we do is then we say, kind of that augmented retrieval concept that I was talking about, where it's a prompt plus context that's related. Just like I said, here's
Hmm.
the rules for Catan and also a question about them. Imagine if Khan just says, here's all the course for, like, I don't know, whatever we're trying to teach you, and then the
Okay.
question. So you know that I want an answer from this body of information. I'm marrying
Oh,
those together and say, answer my question in that
oh,
context.
okay.
So we're going to find AI used throughout applications. When I'm talking about chatting with it, I'm talking about using a model directly through an interface like ChatGPT, or Gemini has an app on your phone or a website.
Mhm.
Same thing with Claude. Um,
So I'm going to throw this out there too, and maybe other evaluators, other teachers have seen this. When I was teaching on Out School, this is maybe a year or two ago, I did have a student who specifically, and this is before I really knew about ChatGPT. Like I said, I'm done homeschooling, and she asked, "Oh, can I just ask ChatGPT for a question?" I was like, aghast. like
Yeah.
what's wrong with your brain, like this, you know, like when my children were growing up, two of them they would just see the world around them and see, and that's how they would develop a question. So when she said that, again, this is gonna be a year ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was like, oh my gosh, like where are we going? Um, and so that's what concerns me. Again, there are other people on this call. Maybe they could jump in and, or maybe I'm the only one, that, when she said that, I thought, oh, so, again, I'll just throw it out there, a cross between using ChatGPT for a question that you might have, or, what's the latest science for a topic, and your own noggin.
Yeah, but like Tim was saying, and I kind of like the analogy that you're having a conversation. If you actually
Okay.
use the Chat GPT program or go to the website, you can ask a question like, what would be a good science topic for a research paper for a teenager? It may
Okay.
suggest several, and then you find some that you say, oh, tell me more about that one. And then what are some resources I could use to that? Or
Okay.
what would
Okay.
be a good starting point to, or what would be some good questions I could answer related to that?
Okay. All right. Well, that helps me kind of work through that, but when she threw that at me like 2 years ago, it was like, like, oh,
Yeah. And
So
I,
yeah,
and I
think of
think
it
when
as a
you go
research
to
assistant.
Google, oh yeah, look at that. It's giving you a whole lesson
Right.
about
Like I could Google how does light refract through a prism? Obviously, and I
Mhm.
spelled prism wrong because it doesn't care. Um, it figures that out because again, it's going to turn it into a token. It's not actually going to use the word prism, but whatever. I could ask Google that, but I could also just ask ChatGPT to summarize it. So think of it as like a teacher's assistant. Like if you'd
Mhm.
raise your hand in class and say, "Hey, I didn't quite understand that." So if I go here and if I'd find, would I like a diagram? Of course, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I want a diagram.
yeah, a lot of times it'll ask at the end, what do you want to do next?
Yeah, it wants to keep the conversation going.
Yeah. But
And
I
that's
like
at
what Audrey, what you were
chatgpt dot.
saying. That was a good point, Audrey. When you do a Google search, it does a summary.
Right.
Actually, I'm starting to enjoy that more because I used to go to the websites and then you have all the pop-ups and you have
Yeah.
to
Yeah. I used to avoid the
read through
summaries
all
and
of their
yeah.
answers, to
Yeah.
find which website helped me
Mhm.
find the
Yeah,
information.
honestly, I used to avoid the AI and go straight to the summary. It's like, I mean, again, this is, but as time has come along, it's like, okay, this is the world we live in.
Yeah.
And again, back to the whole calculator thing, I was a teaching assistant too. And for them to learn it as a tool. Now, when you have a 12th grader who doesn't know what 3 times 3 is, like Susan said, that is a problem.
Yeah.
So knowing when to use ChatGPT as a tool and not as oh my gosh, the paper's due tomorrow, here, ChatGPT, do it for me. And hopefully the teacher doesn't catch that you didn't write this at all.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's where it comes down to. I mean, this is going to get into like philosophy of teaching. Either you want to learn or you don't.
Hmm. Correct.
And if we are forcing people who don't want to learn, maybe we need to ask ourselves the question why we have made learning something they don't want to do.
Yeah.
Because if you want to learn, this is a tool that is going to be tremendously useful in helping you understand. And if you're not great at writing, it's going to be a tool that helps you elevate your communication so you can communicate well with others. But it is not a replacement for thinking, even though you can use it as that. But if you're using that, the question isn't about the tool. The question is, why are we creating a context where our student doesn't even want to learn? And that to me is a foundational question, not a technology question.
Yeah, that sounds like another whole webinar for another
Yeah.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you for, all
So,
right.
and if you want to see, this is Gemini, very similar in like its interface, ChatGPT. It does a little bit more sourcing as to where things come from, which is useful because it's
Okay.
Google's version of a chatbot. So
Interesting. Huh.
My son, who was a PHAA graduate, he works for Google and he's now doing something on this. I have no idea what, but that's his fields now. I'll have to tell him I was at this seminar, Tim.
All right.
Okay.
Well, any other questions anybody wants to ask in the chat, or bring your mic up and ask them? If not, let's all go and have some fun with ChatGPT and
Thank you.
try it this week.
Yep, just use it. Use it. You'll be
Use it.
surprised at what you can do.
Yep.
Okay. Thank
All
you so
right.
much, Tim. Thank you for all of us
Welcome.
here. It was great.
Goodbye. See ya.
Helpful.
All right. Thanks.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Okay, I'm going to close things off.
Oh, Susan, I did find your email.
Oh, okay, great. Well, then you can get back to me then. That would be great.
I have to check with my husband and
Yeah.
see if we are free. We're getting back from a missions trip, so I'm not sure what the plans are,
Okay.
but I'll let you know.
Okay, excellent.